Now, if you're paying extra money for a bottle of avocado oil because you think it's the healthier choice in your kitchen, a series of university studies says you may not actually be getting what you paid for. In 2020, researchers at UC Davis published the first extensive investigation into commercial avocado oil quality in the United States, and the results sent shockwaves through the health food world. At least 82% of the samples they tested were either rancid before their expiration date or diluted with cheaper oils. In 3 separate cases, bottles labeled pure or extra virgin avocado oil were found to contain almost 100% soybean oil. This wasn't a fringe finding buried in an academic journal nobody reads. It became national news precisely because avocado oil had spent the previous several years marketed as one of the cleanest, most premium cooking oils a health-conscious shopper could buy, often commanding a price several times higher than ordinary vegetable oil for exactly that reason. And because so many shoppers had come to trust that price as a proxy for quality without ever questioning it. That should have been the wake-up call the industry needed. Instead, a follow-up UC Davis study confirmed the problem had barely moved. Nearly 70% of 36 private label avocado oil samples, purchased from 19 major retail chains across the United States and Canada, failed to meet basic standards for purity and freshness. Only 31% of the samples tested as genuinely pure avocado oil, and only 36% lived up to the quality claims printed on their own labels. Then came the part almost nobody expected. Independent laboratory testing commissioned by the health watchdog organization Mammovation, using an EPA-certified lab, went looking for something UC Davis wasn't testing for at all: phthalates, the endocrine-disrupting chemicals used to soften plastic. What they found sitting inside bottles marketed with words like natural, clean, and pure was enough to trigger a wave of class action lawsuits against some of the biggest names in American retail. Separately, when the Washington Post asked UC Davis researchers to name names from their private label study, the paper reported that 6 retailers, Walmart, Trader Joe's, Aldi, Metro Meijer, and Kroger, had all sold bottles labeled avocado oil that actually tested high in cheaper sunflower or safflower oil. At Target and Sprouts, the same reporting found bottles that tested consistent with canola oil instead. Bottles from Safeway, ShopRite, and Sam's Club were flagged too. When ShopRite was asked for comment, the company said its vendor had assured them the oil wasn't adulterated, but that it would still commission its own independent investigation. Most of the other retailers named in that reporting simply didn't respond at all. In today's video, we're counting down 7 of the most scrutinized avocado oil brands on the market right now, the ones named in real lawsuits and flagged in real lab results. Then we'll walk through exactly how to tell a genuinely pure bottle from a diluted one before it ever reaches your cart. Let's get into it. Number 7. Sprouts Farmers Market. Sprouts has spent years building its identity around clean eating and whole foods, and its customer base leans heavily toward health-conscious shoppers, including people managing autoimmune conditions and inflammatory disorders who specifically choose avocado oil because they're trying to avoid seed oils altogether. In October 2024, a class action lawsuit was filed against Sprouts Farmers Market alleging that its private label avocado oil was falsely advertised as pure. The complaint pointed directly to the UC Davis findings, arguing that Sprouts' own house brand fit the same pattern of adulteration researchers had already documented across the private label category. For a shopper specifically avoiding seed oils for a medical reason, a bottle secretly cut with sunflower, safflower, or canola oil isn't just a marketing letdown. It defeats the entire purpose of the purchase. The broader Washington Post reporting on this same round of testing found that Target and Sprouts store-brand bottles specifically showed chemical signatures consistent with canola oil rather than the sunflower or safflower blends found at other chains. A detail that matters because it shows the adulteration problem isn't limited to one supplier or one type of substitute oil. It's a pattern that shows up across different private label supply chains using different cheaper oils, which suggests the root cause sits somewhere upstream at the level of oil brokers and wholesale suppliers, rather than with any single retailer acting alone. Number 6. Sam's Club, Olivari. Olivari is distributed almost exclusively through Sam's Club's wholesale membership model, sold in large format bottles aimed at bigger households and small food service operations. A proposed class action lawsuit filed against Sam's Club alleges that its Olivari 100% pure avocado oil is falsely advertised, arguing that independent testing referencing the UC Davis research shows the product tested impure and contains other undisclosed oils. The scale here matters. A large container gets opened repeatedly over weeks or months, and every time a diluted oil is exposed to fresh air, the unstable fats it was allegedly cut with begin to oxidize faster than pure avocado oil would on its own. For a bulk product meant to serve an entire household or a small restaurant kitchen over an extended period, that repeated exposure compounds whatever quality problem existed on day one. It also means the economic incentive scales in exactly the wrong direction. A wholesale retailer moving thousands of large format bottles at a lower per unit markup has a much larger absolute profit to gain from even a modest percentage of cheaper oil blended into the base product, precisely because the volume sold is so much higher than a single grocery store-sized bottle. That volume also means any single contaminated batch reaches a proportionally larger number of households before anyone outside a lab has a chance to notice something is off. Number 5. Aldi Simply Nature. Aldi's Simply Nature line leans hard into green, natural-sounding branding, and its avocado oil is no exception, marketed with imagery of fresh halved avocados on the label. In 2024, a class action lawsuit was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York, alleging that Aldi's Simply Nature 100% pure avocado oil doesn't accurately reflect what's inside the bottle. The complaint cites the same Washington Post reporting on the UC Davis research, and argues that independent third-party analysis found the product cut with other oils despite the ingredient list naming only refined avocado oil. This case was significant enough that plaintiffs' attorneys later petitioned the Judicial Panel on Multi-District Litigation to consolidate it with lawsuits against Walmart, Trader Joe's, and other retailers into a single coordinated docket, arguing the cases all share the same underlying factual questions about industry-wide adulteration. That consolidation motion is itself worth pausing on. Multi-district litigation is typically reserved for situations where courts anticipate a large number of related cases raising overlapping evidence, and the fact that plaintiffs saw enough common ground across 9 separate pending lawsuits against different retailers to request one shared docket says something about how systemic the underlying supply chain issue is believed to be, rather than a series of isolated, insulated incidents. Number 4. Walmart. Great Value. Great Value is one of the most widely purchased grocery brands in the country, and for millions of budget-conscious families, it's often the only avocado oil option within reach on a tight budget. A class action lawsuit filed against Walmart alleges that its Great Value avocado oil is adulterated and mixed with cheaper oils despite being marketed and priced as a pure, single-ingredient product. The plaintiff behind that suit says she purchased the bottle specifically believing she was buying a heart-healthy product worth the higher price over ordinary canola oil, only to have independent testing contradict what the label claimed. The complaint notes that avocado oil is frequently priced up to 4 times higher than competing oils like canola, specifically because consumers believe they're paying for its distinct nutritional profile, including its concentration of oleic acid and antioxidants tied to cardiovascular benefits. If a supposedly pure bottle is quietly cut with a fraction of the cost, that price gap becomes the entire profit motive. For households stretching every dollar specifically to afford what they believe is the healthier option that's the most direct version of this problem there is, because the population most likely to be budget-constrained enough to only afford the private label option is also the population with the least room to simply switch to a pricier verified brand instead. Number 3. Target Good & Gather. Target has spent years positioning Good & Gather as a premium, better-for-you private label aimed at shoppers willing to pay more for perceived quality and transparency. In October 2024, plaintiff Brittany Valdovinos filed a class action lawsuit against Target in California federal court, case number 224CV08572, alleging that Good & Gather avocado oil is falsely labeled 100% pure. The complaint leans heavily on the UC Davis finding that nearly 70% of tested private label oils were rancid or mixed with other oils, and it goes further alleging that Target was aware of willfully blind to or negligent about the purity problems in its own supply chain. The lawsuit argues that any reasonably diligent retailer selling a premium-priced ingredient would have tested its own private label product independently, especially once industry-wide adulteration research had already been public for years. The complaint also makes a pointed economic argument. If Target's avocado oil had been accurately labeled as a blend rather than a pure product, the company would have had to price it lower to remain competitive with actual blended oils on the shelf. In other words, the alleged mislabeling isn't framed as a passive oversight but as an active pricing strategy, charging a premium associated with purity while allegedly not delivering the purity that price was supposed to reflect. Number 2. Kroger, Private Selection and Simple Truth. Kroger runs two private label lines that both carry avocado oil. Private Selection, marketed as the premium tier, and Simple Truth, marketed around natural and organic positioning. Independent laboratory testing commissioned by Momodation through an EPA-certified lab found Kroger's Private Selection avocado oil contained a total phthalate level of 3032 parts per billion, while its Simple Truth organic avocado oil tested at 912 parts per billion, placing both bottles among the highest phthalate readings recorded in that entire investigation. Phthalates are industrial chemicals primarily used to soften PVC plastic, and research has linked chronic exposure to endocrine disruption, altered hormone signaling, and reproductive health effects, which is precisely why regulatory bodies in multiple countries have already restricted certain phthalate compounds in children's products and food packaging. Finding elevated levels inside two separate store-brand oils from the same retailer raises a supply chain question rather than a single product one. Whatever processing, storage, or transport step is introducing that contamination appears to be affecting more than one product line under the same corporate roof, which suggests the source sits somewhere further upstream than the final bottling stage, likely at the level of a shared oil supplier or a shared storage and transport process feeding both private label lines simultaneously. It's worth being fair here. Kroger did face a separate mislabeling lawsuit over its cold-pressed avocado oil, and in June 2024, a federal judge in California dismissed that particular case, ruling the plaintiff hadn't shown the product was actually advertised using the word pure or that it was adulterated as alleged. That legal outcome doesn't cancel out the phthalate lab results, which came from a separate, independent testing process entirely. The lawsuit and the lab data are two different pieces of evidence, and only one of them has been tested in front of a judge so far. Number 1. Primal Kitchen, Kraft Heinz. Primal Kitchen built its reputation as a trusted name inside the paleo, keto, and clean eating movements, and it carried that health halo branding right up until Kraft Heinz completed its roughly $200 million acquisition of the company in 2019. Folding it into the Springboard platform Kraft Heinz built specifically to acquire and scale disruptive, better-for-you brands. In June 2025, a class action lawsuit, James et al. V. Primal Nutrition LLC, case number 125CV000691, was filed in the U.S. .611, was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of California. The complaint alleges that Primal Kitchen's avocado oil is falsely marketed as pure while independent testing shows it contains phthalates. Mammovation's EPA-certified lab testing found Primal Kitchen's pure avocado oil carried a total phthalate level of 2-phthalate menyl 1,774 parts per billion, one of the highest readings recorded across every avocado oil brand the organization tested. It's worth understanding, in general terms, why researchers take a phthalate reading like that seriously at all. Phthalates are known as endocrine disruptors, meaning they can interfere with the body's normal hormone signaling rather than acting as a direct poison in the way a contaminant like lead does. Health agencies and researchers have linked cumulative phthalate exposure across food packaging and household products, combined to concerns around reproductive development and hormone regulation, which is why some phthalate compounds are already restricted in children's toys and food contact materials in various countries. A single bottle of oil is only one small contributor to a person's total exposure across an entire diet and environment. But it's exactly the kind of avoidable contributor that a shopper can reasonably choose to reduce once they know it's there. The lawsuit raises a second issue that's almost more revealing than the phthalate number itself. Primal Kitchen prominently displays a non-GMO Project Verified seal on its packaging, a label that implies the product cleared a meaningful safety bar. But there is currently no genetically modified avocado variety commercially available anywhere in the world. Every avocado oil on every shelf in America is technically non-GMO because there's no GMO version to compare it to. Printing that seal on a product where it carries zero practical meaning, then charging a premium price partly justified by that seal, is the exact kind of labeling most consumers have no way of catching on their own. Because it isn't a false claim in the strict sense, it's a true, but functionally meaningless one dressed up to look like a safety guarantee. A similar phthalate-related lawsuit was separately filed earlier in 2025 against Madhava Honey Limited over its own olive and avocado oils marketed as clean, suggesting this specific pattern. Premium branding paired with elevated phthalate readings isn't confined to a single company. A brand built on the promise of stripping away industrial food shortcuts ended up, according to independent lab testing in a filed federal complaint, carrying one of the highest phthalate readings in the entire product category. If this investigation is already changing how you look at the oil in your pantry, you're most of the way through. Because it's not all bad news. Some brands have consistently tested clean across multiple rounds of independent research, and knowing their names is a good starting point, even though the real skill here is learning to check any bottle yourself. When UC Davis ran its original 2020 study, out of 22 avocado oil brands tested, only 2 came back both pure and non-oxidized: Chosen Foods and Marianne's, both refined avocado oils processed in Mexico. Chosen Foods has continued to lean into that result as a core part of its marketing ever since, and it has publicly stated that it tests every batch and maintains a traceable supply chain from grove to bottle. The company has also pointed to a more recent development worth knowing about: the Codex Alimentarius Commission, the joint food standards body run by the World Health Organization and the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, has moved to establish an international purity standard for avocado oil specifically because of the adulteration research that came out of UC Davis. That kind of standard, once finalized, would give regulators and retailers an actual enforceable benchmark to test against, something the entire category has lacked since it became commercially popular. Among the virgin-grade oils in that same 2020 study, one stood out for purity and freshness: CalPure, a cold-pressed virgin avocado oil produced in California. Because virgin and extra virgin oils are extracted without heat or chemical refining, they're generally considered a higher standard of authenticity when they do test clean. And CalPure's performance in independent testing has made it a recurring recommendation among industry researchers and reviewers looking for verified virgin-grade options. Costco's Kirkland Signature Avocado Oil has also been repeatedly cited by reviewers and researchers as one of the more consistent higher-volume options on the market. Worth considering if you're buying in the same bulk format as the Olivari brand discussed earlier, though. As with any brand, quality can vary by batch, and no company is exempt from the need for ongoing testing. It's also worth mentioning that a newer certification effort called Seed Oil Free Certified has started independently testing avocado oil brands that voluntarily submit for review, requiring documented sourcing and lab verification before a product can carry that seal. Early results from that program have been sobering in their own right, with roughly 2/3 of voluntarily submitted samples failing to meet the purity bar on first submission, which tells you the adulteration problem isn't just something lawsuits are alleging after the fact. It's something showing up even when a company proactively wants to prove its own product is clean. None of this means you should just memorize 4 brand names and stop thinking about it. Batches change, suppliers change, and even good companies can end up with a bad shipment if their own supplier substitutes something upstream without telling them. What actually protects you long-term is knowing how to evaluate any bottle yourself right there in the aisle before it goes in your cart. Start with the price. Producing genuine avocado oil is expensive. It takes somewhere around 12 to 20 whole avocados just to press a single liter, which is part of why avocado oil is often priced up to 4 or 5 times higher than comparable seed oils. If you see a bottle claiming to be pure avocado oil priced at or barely above the cost of a bottle of canola or soybean oil of the same size, that price alone is a warning sign. Researchers have specifically pointed out that the cheapest products in this category carry the highest rates of documented adulteration, since a producer looking to blend in cheaper oil is doing it specifically to protect a profit margin that a genuinely honest price wouldn't need to protect. That said, an expensive price tag doesn't guarantee purity either. Several of the brands named in real lawsuits above were priced at a genuine premium and still allegedly failed independent testing. Price is a filter, not a guarantee, and it should be the first check you run, not the only one. Next, check the color. Genuine cold-pressed virgin or extra virgin avocado oil should have a vibrant, saturated green color, coming from natural chlorophyll carried over from the avocado flesh itself. Hold the bottle up to store lighting. If the label says extra virgin or cold-pressed in large letters, but the oil inside looks pale yellow or nearly clear, that's a mismatch worth questioning because that appearance is far more typical of a heavily refined or heat-processed oil, or one that's been diluted. It's worth noting that a refined avocado oil, one that doesn't claim extra virgin status, can legitimately be paler in color since refining strips out much of the chlorophyll along with other compounds. The red flag is specifically when a virgin or extra virgin claim is paired with a color that doesn't match it, because that combination suggests either a labeling error or something closer to a deliberate substitution. Look at the packaging. Avocado oil is a delicate fat that degrades under light and heat. Clear plastic bottles sitting under bright store lighting accelerate that breakdown, and some research has raised separate concerns about plastic packaging as a potential source of trace plasticizer migration into the oil over time, which is a genuinely open question given how many of the brands with the highest phthalate readings in this investigation happen to be packaged in materials other than dark glass. Brands that store their product in dark amber or deep green glass are making a deliberate choice to protect the oil from light-driven oxidation. And that choice is usually a decent proxy for a company that's paying attention to quality control more broadly, since it typically costs more to package a product that way than to use standard clear plastic. Read the label carefully, and don't be swayed by buzzwords alone. A non-GMO project verified seal on avocado oil, as the Primal Kitchen case shows, doesn't mean what it implies, because no commercial GMO avocado exists to compare against. Words like natural, clean, and premium carry no enforceable legal definition in this category at all, meaning any brand can print them regardless of what's actually inside the bottle. What actually matters is whether the brand discloses a harvest or production date, not just a distant best-by date, since fresher oil is less likely to have gone rancid before it even reached the shelf. Buying a bottle size so your household can finish it within a month or two of opening also meaningfully reduces the odds of the oil oxidizing at home after purchase, since every time the bottle is opened and resealed, fresh oxygen gets introduced and the clock on rancidity starts moving again. Finally, trust your nose and your stovetop. Genuine avocado oil smells rich, buttery, and faintly grassy, sometimes with a subtle earthy or mushroom-like note. If a bottle smells sharp plastic-like or simply off the moment you open it, that's usually a sign of oxidation. And oxidized oil carries elevated levels of free radicals that can damage cells rather than support the health benefits you bought the product for in the first place. And if you heat a small amount in a pan over medium heat and it starts smoking heavily and unpleasantly well below 400 degrees Fahrenheit, that's inconsistent with genuine avocado oil, which is known for a high smoke point generally cited near 520 degrees Fahrenheit when it's unrefined and unadulterated. Neither of these tests requires special equipment, and both can be done with a bottle you've already purchased, which makes them a useful backup even if you didn't have the chance to check color and packaging before buying. Keep both in your back pocket the next time you're unsure whether a bottle already in your pantry is still safe to cook with. After all of this, the honest takeaway isn't that every bottle on the shelf is contaminated or that every major retailer is lying to you. It's that an entire product category grew fast enough and profitably enough that quality standards and enforcement never caught up to consumer demand. UC Davis researchers have said plainly that no enforceable federal standard currently exists to define what avocado oil legally has to contain. The same regulatory gap that has historically affected products like honey and ground spices before industry standards eventually caught up in those categories. Real lawsuits are working their way through federal courts right now, specifically because independent lab testing keeps finding gaps between what's printed on the label and what's actually inside the bottle in at least one of those cases. The one against Kroger's cold-pressed line has already shown that not every claim survives scrutiny in front of a judge, which is exactly why checking the bottle yourself matters more than trusting either the label or a single lawsuit at face value. You don't need to become a food chemist to protect your kitchen from this. You need to check the color against the grade claimed on the label. Look for a dark glass bottle instead of clear plastic. Question a price that's suspiciously close to seed oil, and trust a rancid smell or an early smoke point when you notice one. A label that says pure is a claim. A bottle that passes your own 5 checks in the store is closer to proof. None of these checks take more than a minute in the aisle, and together they tell you more about what's actually in the bottle than any word printed on the front of it ever will. If this changed how you'll shop for avocado oil next time, share it with someone in your life who's been buying the wrong bottle without knowing it.